Hey guys, what's up? It is Public back with another video on the Shadowlands beta, and today we're going to be looking at Soulbinds. And specifically, if you don't know, every covenant that you choose inside of Shadowlands gives you access to 3 Soulbinds. Now, these 3 Soulbinds are not priest-specific in any way, shape, or form. They are generic in the sense that if I'm a priest, a mage, or a shaman, whatever it is, I get access to the same Soulbinds and the same trees that come along with them. Now, the only thing that I can change inside of those trees on a per-class basis, or per character basis, rather, is what conduits that I'm actually socketing into those trees. So I'm not going to cover conduits in this video. If you haven't seen that, I've already done that in a previous video, so check that out if you haven't already. But today we're going to look at each one of these Soulbinds. What are the builds, what are the trees, and what are the cool powers that we get depending on the covenant and Soulbind that we choose. So today we're going to be looking at Necrolord. Look out for the other 3 covenants in future videos. Alright, so let's get started. Alright guys, the first Soulbind we're going to look at from the Necrolord covenant is Plague Deviser Marleth. This is kind of the oozy guy. I don't know, he's got like 6 icons here that are all around like oozes and stuff. You see him, he's right over here. This is actually the first one that you get access to, so let's go ahead and dive into these guys here. So first things first, if you haven't seen this tree yet, so we get access to this kind of tree of abilities, right? And each some of these guys has, baseline abilities. So the first one you have to pick in this case is Volatile Solvent. Using Fleshcraft with nearby corpses derives a benefit from a corpse, differing based on the creature's type. So this basically works with and a lot of these guys do this, works with your base signature ability that everyone has access to. In this case for Necrolord, it is Fleshcraft, which is this, this shield here. Right, so depending on enemies that I absorb with this guy, I will get different benefits. I don't know all of these yet. When I make the kind of edit this, I'll kind of put what we see right now in the spell description, but that's what we have now. So you always get that, and then you get to choose here where you want to go next, right? So immediately off the bat, we get a choice of one of these 3 conduits. So for the sake of this video, we're just looking at these guys, not conduits. So, but you get to choose a defensive, a throughput, or a utility one right off the bat, depending on the tree that you want to go through. So if you go the defensive route, you get to choose Travel with Bloop. So while standing still, you slowly build stacks of this buff. At 10 stacks, your movement speed is increased by 10% for 2 minutes, which is pretty sweet, actually. If you think about, any fight where you have to, you're planting for a while, everyone's stacked up for healing or whatever reasons, it's actually pretty easy to get stacks with this guy. Now, if I go ahead and reset this guy, and let's say I want to go down the middle path instead, we get Ooze's Frictionless Coating, and this is what you get paired with the Throughput Conduit. So if you choose to go DPS route, this is what you get. Reduced below 50% health. Ooze courses over you, granting you a shield for 10% of your max HP for 20 seconds, right? So a nice kind of auto proc shield below 50%. It's pretty nice. So basically DPS plus defensive. And then if we reset this one more time, the third choice you can go is this kind of finesse or the kind of utility-esque slots. And then this guy, you get Plague's Preemptive Strike. Your first attack or spell cast on an enemy increases your damage done to them by 10% for 5 seconds. Doesn't occur if you're busy striking other targets. So basically you get kind of one target with this guy, balances 2. This is not the best. Obviously, it's only 5 seconds, which, Shadow Priest damage, usually happens over a long duration, not bursty, but is what it is. So you can see here the start of how the Soulbind system currently works in game where, if you slot in a utility conduit, you don't get a utility afterwards, like a utility Soulbind right afterwards. So they kind of like to pair opposites here. So you can see this is the DPS option here, the throughput option, I should say. But that's not paired with the throughput conduit slot. So you get to kind of pick and choose, do I want to put a conduit in here for this, benefit, or do I want to get the baseline Soulbind instead? And as I already mentioned in the conduit video, this is each Soulbind favors one or more or one specific conduit type. So this guy favors the finesse type. As you can see here, I can get up to 3 finesse slots in my tree. So you can see I get a fixed finesse slot here. You have to pick this one. And then again, we get to go down the list here. We have 2 options. So Kevin's Keyring allows opening of locks that require up to 600 skill. This actually gives you an extra ability on your bars, I think. I forget where it is. Maybe I already have it on my bars or somewhere, but it actually puts a lock picking ability somewhere. I guess it's not working. I had it before. Or it's somewhere, I'm just missing it. But anyways, so you get to pick up locks, and it's got like a 12-hour cooldown or something crazy. It's very, very long, but there it is. And it's a lock pick. It's whatever. It's a lot of these guys kind of have some weird ones, but that's what it is. And then get a defensive option, go down to throughput, and then the final ability here is Ultimate Form. Fleshcraft, which again is this shield, renders you immune to crowd control, right? So this is actually for the duration of Fleshcraft. Oh, looks like I didn't. I have to activate the Soulbind. There you go. There's the Keyring ability. So you have to actually turn on the Soulbind. And now, if I recast Flashcraft in 2 minutes, it's actually renders you immune to crowd control for the duration the shield is active. So if the shield gets broken, you are no longer immune. All right, so if we reset this guy here, and let's say instead I go down this right path, so we get Cleansing Slime, which is defeating enemies, has a chance to deploy your Plagueborn Slime, which improves remaining durability on your armor, right? So between these two, it doesn't really matter what you want. It's basically like, do you want an extra defensive slot, or do you want an extra utility slot, right? So that's your choice, whatever you want to do, right? And then, again, you get down to the ultimate form. Right, so as the utility option, this guy has some pretty slick stuff. You know, not a whole lot of stuff from like a DPS perspective. It's not the best, right? But it's a thing. It's really based about, you know, what you can get from Fleshcraft. It's really buffing that more than anything. But if you want to be able to, you know, switch and get that, I mean, honestly, the ultimate form immunity is the best part about this guy. But, you know, it's an option. There it is. That's one of the Soulbinds for it now. Okay, the second Soulbind that we have access to right now for Necrolord is Amini, whatever, however you want to say it. This awesome looking construct dude. He looks just absolutely amazing. And basically, this is one of the more complex conduits or whatever, but or Soulbinds, excuse me. He has a lot of abilities that kind of feed off of each other and play around. This is the throughput conduit option. So when I've been testing a lot on beta, this has been the one I've been using. So first things first, this is the ability that kind of starts off everything and caps out as you get more Soulbinds. When you use your Necrolord class ability or spell, which for our case is Unholy Nova, so every time I use my Nova, I gain a stack of Magnificent Skin, stacking up to 4 times. Right, so, you know, basically every 4 casts you get to do something. And then using Fleshcraft consumes that skin to increase your max HP by 5% per stack for 2 minutes, right? So if you can see, I use Unholy Nova real quick here, and I get a stack of Magnificent Skin. So basically, while you're doing a dungeon or whatever else it is, you know, at 4 stacks, you should probably use it. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't gain more stacks. It does cap at that point. So that's the first ability. Very nice shield. And then you get 2 options here. So the left side is this Cartilaginous Legs. I'm probably not saying that right. After taking falling damage, the health loss becomes a shield lasting 30 seconds, right? So it's interesting. Just a small note, just doing all the dungeons that I've done in beta, there are several dungeons where you are jumping down from some point, and, you know, you do take fall damage. So this is actually somewhat useful in a dungeon environment. This does proc in a dungeon. So although it is kind of, you know, it's not, you know, that great, but it's something. And then you get the option of a throughput conduit here. So you can see I already have something slotted here. Now, if you want the other path, so this is the option with a defensive conduit next to it. You may attune your Hearth Kidney Stone to any resting location and return to it 24-hour cooldown reduced by 5 minutes for every killing blow. So this is an additional Hearthstone that you get access to. It's got a 1-day cooldown by default, 5-second cast. So it looks, you know, kind of similar to what we had from if you're a Vulpera with one of their racials. And then you get, like I said, a defensive slot. And then you get to choose a finesse. This one is fixed. And then again, the path splits out one more time. So we have 3 options here. So the first one is Gristled Toes. Movement speed increased by 2% for every nearby enemy up to 10%. It's pretty cool. 10% movement speed, which, you know, if you stack with the Levitate one, you know, lots of movement speed here. You get this option, which is gain 1% haste for 20 seconds after defeating an enemy, stacks 5 times, right? So immediately as a Shadow Priest, you're like, oh my god, haste. Yes, yes, please. Especially on Alpha, considering I have 13% haste right now, but I've farmed some gear, right? So getting this is awesome. And then the third option, reduce below 20% health. You fear nearby enemies for 3 seconds. So just kind of a weird random fear. This is definitely feels like the PvP option, if anything, but don't really know the use cases in a PvE world. So, and as I mentioned before, you know, if you want this haste option, which, you know, is personally my favorite, you have to pick a defensive conduit afterwards, right? If you want the extra throughput conduit, remember, Amini is the throughput soulbind that we have access to for Necrolord, because we have 1, 2, 3 throughput conduits that you can have here. Well, you can't get the haste one. So you either get a haste or the pre-specific conduit. So in my testing, I love having this haste ability, so I always choose this. And then you get a defensive option after that. And then the last thing, again, you do get a fixed throughput slot. Okay, and then his last ability, and this is what I was saying before, where everything kind of plays off of each other. So each enemy you defeat grants you 1 stack of Runescribe Bone, reducing magic damage taken by 1%. And at 5 stacks, your Soulbind traits are empowered for 30 seconds, right? So basically, from a dungeon perspective, as you keep killing mobs, you're empowering Amini's other abilities that you've chosen, right? So you can see the list of these guys here. For the most part, it's basically just doubling their effectiveness. So releasing stacks deals shadow damage to nearby enemies from the Fleshcraft shield. The shield amount is doubled. Cooldown reduction doubled from the Hearthstone. More movement speed. And the big one for me personally as a Shadow Priest, right, is the haste increase is doubled, right? So if you remember, this guy gained 1% haste for 20 seconds after defeating an enemy up to 5%. This now is 2%. Stacking up to 10%, right? So upwards of 10% haste as you're killing enemies. This is awesome. Love the haste. Love it, love it, love it. And the fear duration increase. So he's got some cool abilities. This is definitely my favorite one. It's probably the one that I'm, most leaning towards right now, the one I'm playing with the most. But, we'll see what happens, guys. So that is Amini. Okay, guys, the last Soulbind that we have for the Necrolord Covenant is Bonesmith Hyremir. Anyways, he's a blacksmith, basically. So this is the defensive Soulbind that we have access to for Necrolord. So he has up to 3 defensive conduits that you can slot in here. So let's go over his abilities. So starting off, first things first, we have Serrated Spalders, which inflict shadow damage to your attacker over 5 seconds when hit at melee range. Not sure if we're ever going to see this really proc much at all for a Shadow Priest, but, if you want the defensive conduit, you'll pick up this. The other option is defeat an enemy reduces Fleshcraft's cooldown by 1 second. Keep in mind, Fleshcraft is our shield, so this is pretty nice if you're especially killing a lot of enemies. And then you get option to either a utility slot and then a defensive slot, depending on what you picked, and then a fixed throughput slot here. And then the tree splits out, so we have 3 options here. The first one is defeating an enemy restores 1% of your max HP after 3 seconds, stacks to 5. So again, if you're not noticing it quite yet, the Necrolord Covenant definitely has a big theme of after kill an enemy, get something, which is why, a lot of people have been saying this is a great Mythic Plus Covenant for that choice, just because there's so much there about killing mobs, which is nice. Second option, damaging or healing a target below 35%. Grants you 25% increased move speed for 5 seconds. It's got a 1-minute cooldown though, which is, is what it is. If you want the throughput option here though, you do have to take this guy. And typically, from like a DPS perspective, you almost always want your 2 throughputs, just how it stands now. But again, depends on what your choices are, right? And this last one, after landing 10 critical strikes, you gain 20% increased crit for 10 seconds. May only occur once per 1 minute. So, every 1 minute we get 20% crit for 10 seconds. I mean, from a Shadow Priest perspective, we typically like crit in the past, but, that really depends on how much we're relying on auspicious spirits and other things to keep us in void form, which isn't really a thing. So unsure about the actual usefulness of this guy. I think right now I'm leaning towards instead, going down the middle path here, but numbers are still work in progress. They're still changing things, so we'll see what happens. And that guy's paired up with a defensive option. And then you're guaranteed a defensive guy here, so you will get that one here. And then the last choice you have here is you either get mounted movement speed increased by 5%. If attacked while you're mounted, your movement speed is increased by an additional 10% for 30 seconds. So, pretty nice for open world stuff if you're, trying to get away from mobs. Or this one, which is not implemented yet, you gain mining materials from completing activities that contribute to your Great Vault, which is some of the kind of Covenant weekly content. Right, and then the last guy, which is the kind of signature ability for the Bonesmith. Upon death, your armor continues to fight, allowing you to fight for an additional 10 seconds. During this time, your damage and healing done is reduced by 50%. Can't receive healing. So, I mean, this is kind of neat. It's basically like Mordekaiser from League of Legends, or maybe it doesn't work like that anymore. I don't know, but, you fight as a ghost for a short period of time after you die. Which is pretty cool. It's fun to play with, but, unsure of its actual usefulness. If you're in a raid, right, just don't die, right? It's fine. Easy. All right, so that is the Bonesmith. All right, guys, and that is all of the Soulbinds we have for the Necrolord Covenant. Hope you guys learned something or saw something cool. So join us for the next one. We're going to look over, we have 3 more Covenants to do in these videos. If I've already released them, you'll see them in the description below or the playlist. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.